It was just past noon, on a quiet weekday, the kind of day when the sun warms the pavement and the streets hum with small-town stillness. Inside, Bella Vita Cafe, a trendy new restaurant with exposed brick walls and jazz playing softly over the speakers, the lunch rush had just begun. Young professionals chatted over salads, and espresso waiters moved briskly from table to table, and the hostess stood at the front with a polished smile, greeting each guest like clockwork. That's when the old man walked in. He was frail, wearing a faded military jacket and carrying a cane that trembled slightly with each step. His eyes, sharp but tired, scanned the room as if he hadn't eaten out in a long time, maybe not since before his wife passed. "Table for one, please," he said, voice low but steady. The hostess gave him a quick glance. Her smile faltered. "We're actually quite full right now," she said, though a quick look behind her revealed several empty tables. The old man looked confused. "I can wait." She hesitated, then shook her head. "I'm sorry. We have a dress code here. It's just not really a good time." His shoulders slumped. People in the restaurant started to notice. A few turned back to their meals. One couple raised their eyebrows, but no one said anything. The hostess tried to move on to the next guest. In line, a well-dressed couple who looked apologetically at the old man before following her inside. And just like that, he was left standing there, alone, ashamed, until someone rose from the back corner. A young man no older than 25 closed his menu, pushed back his chair, and walked to the front. He wore jeans, and a hoodie, didn't look like anyone important. But there was something calm and confident in the way he moved. He looked the hostess straight in the eye. "I'll give him my table." The old man blinked, stunned. "That's not necessary." But the young man shook his head. "It is." And what happened next changed not only that afternoon, but the lives of everyone in that restaurant. Because sometimes it only takes one person to stand up for everyone else, to see what truly matters. The restaurant had gone still. Forks paused mid-air. Conversations trailed off. Even the background music seemed to soften as everyone turned toward the front, watching the young man help the old gentleman toward his table. The hostess stood frozen, clearly unsure of what to say. But the young man didn't wait for her approval. He simply guided the veteran to the seat he had just been occupying, then pulled out the chair for him, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I insist," he said, smiling gently. The old man sat slowly, gripping the edges of the table with shaky hands. "You didn't have to do this, son." "I know," the young man replied. "That's why I did." A server came over, still uncertain. "Should I bring menus?" The young man looked at the old man. "What's your favorite dish here?" "I wouldn't know." The man chuckled softly. "I've never been. My wife used to love coming here. I thought maybe today I'd give it a try." The young man turned to the waiter. "He'll have whatever he wants. It's on me." Murmurs rippled through the restaurant. The couple who had been seated just before glanced at each other and then down at their food, ashamed. A teenager nearby nudged his mom and whispered, "Why wouldn't they let him eat?" It wasn't long before the manager arrived. He was a sharp-dressed man in his 40s, wearing a Bluetooth earpiece and a permanent look of stress. He approached the table with forced politeness. "Is everything all right here?" The young man didn't flinch. "Not really. Your hostess refused to seat this gentleman. Said there was a dress code, even though he's wearing a military jacket." The manager glanced at the veteran, then at the staring customers, realizing the situation had already outgrown any easy solution. "We deeply apologize," he said quickly. "That was a mistake. Of course, he's welcome here." The old man raised a hand. "I don't need the apology. I just wanted to sit down for lunch." The manager nodded, clearly uncomfortable. "It won't happen again." Then he disappeared back into the kitchen, perhaps hoping the heat of embarrassment would cool down on its own. The young man pulled up a chair beside the old man and sat with him as he ordered. They talked about the weather, about the cafe's decor, about the man's wife, June, who had passed away 2 years ago and used to order the eggplant parmesan every single visit. "You remind me of my grandson," the man said after a while. The young man smiled. "Where is he now? Haven't seen him in years," he said quietly. "Family's complicated, you know." That hit the young man harder than he expected, because family was complicated, and he was carrying his own share of regrets. And though neither of them said it aloud, something passed between them, a silent understanding, a thread of respect. What neither of them knew was that someone had begun filming the whole thing, and that video would soon take on a life of its own. By the time the two men were finishing their meal, the energy in the cafe had shifted entirely. A waitress brought out a dessert tiramisu and said quietly, "This one's from table 6. They wanted to say thank you." The old man blinked. "But I didn't order this." The young man smiled. "I think it's more of a gesture." The older man picked up his fork with trembling hands and took a bite. "June used to make this from scratch. Hers was terrible." He chuckled. "But I miss it all the same." The young man laughed with him, and the two sat in silence for a while sipping coffee. Across the restaurant, phones were out. The video someone had started filming earlier was now spreading on social media. No captions, no edits, just the raw moment of the old man being turned away, and the young man offering up his seat. And it wasn't just being watched, it was being felt. Within hours, the video had racked up tens of thousands of views. Comments poured in. "That kid was raised right. Shame on that restaurant for treating a vet like that." This brought me to tears. Back in the restaurant, the young man glanced at his watch. "I should get going soon." The old man reached out and gently touched his arm. "Thank you for seeing me, really seeing me." The young man looked into the old man's eyes. "You served your country. It's the least someone could do." The old man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a pin. Faded and weathered, it bore the insignia of the 101st Airborne. "This was my backup," he said. "I gave my original to my son years ago. I want you to have this one." The young man hesitated. "Sir, I couldn't." "Please," the old man said firmly. "You stood up when no one else would. That means something." So he took the pin, gently, carefully, and promised he would never forget the moment. As they stood to leave, the manager reappeared, this time with a different tone. "Sir, your meal is on the house," he said to the old man. "No," the veteran replied. "He already paid." And I accepted. Then he looked around at the tables watching him and said, "But next time a man walks in like me, maybe just let him sit down." The room fell silent, and for the first time that afternoon, everyone listened. Outside the restaurant, the sun was beginning to lower in the sky. The two men walked slowly toward the street, side by side. The old man's steps were careful, measured. The younger man stayed close, quietly steadying him when the sidewalk dipped. "I live just a few blocks down," the old man said. "Used to walk here with June every Sunday afternoon after church." The young man glanced sideways. "Did she like the restaurant?" "She did. I think she liked the people watching more. We'd sit outside, share a plate, and talk about nothing." He paused. "I hadn't been back since she passed. Today felt right. Until I stepped inside." The young man stopped walking. "I'm sorry for what happened." The old man waved it off. "Don't be." You turned it around. They stood on the corner for a moment, saying goodbye. The young man extended his hand. "I'm Jay, by the way." The old man smiled. "Harold." They shook hands, firm, respectful. Jay turned to walk away, but something in him hesitated. "You need help getting home." Harold grinned. "I might take you up on that." So Jay walked him the rest of the way. Along the cracked sidewalk, past the neighborhood shops, through the streets that Harold and June once strolled hand in hand. When they reached the small white house with the chipping fence, Harold fumbled with his keys. Jay reached out and helped. Inside the house was quiet, still. A mantel lined with old black and white photos, a single armchair near the window, a flag folded neatly in a display case. Jay felt the weight of it all. "Would you like a glass of lemonade?" Harold offered. Jay sat in the kitchen, with him two mismatched cups between them, and listened. Harold talked about his days in the war, about how he met June at a USO dance, about the boy they'd raised, the same son he hadn't spoken to in years. "He didn't approve when I remarried after June," Harold admitted, "but I was lonely. I thought he'd understand. Haven't seen him since." Jay sat quietly. He didn't push, didn't offer platitudes, just listened the way no one had in a long, long time. And as Harold spoke, something in Jay softened too, because he knew what it felt like to carry silence, to walk around with regret, to miss someone while pretending you didn't. When he finally stood to leave, Harold said, "I hope this won't be the last time." Jay smiled. "It won't be." And it wasn't. Jay returned the next weekend, just like he said he would. This time, he brought lunch, 2 pastrami sandwiches and a slice of chocolate cake from the corner deli. They ate on the front porch, the afternoon breeze gently rustling the wind chimes above them. Harold looked lighter somehow, his movements still slow, but his voice steadier, his stories more vivid. Jay listened to them all. Each visit after that became routine. Every Saturday, same time. Sometimes they'd sit in silence and watch the clouds drift by. Other times, they'd debate baseball or talk about the news or share pieces of their pasts they hadn't told anyone else. Jay told Harold about his own father, how he left when Jay was just a kid, how his mother raised him alone while working 2 jobs, how he'd started waiting tables right after high school to help pay the bills, how he always felt like he had something to prove. "I've made mistakes," Jay admitted, "said things I regret. But helping you that day, I don't know. It felt like something I was meant to do." Harold nodded. "You remind me of my son," he said again. "Before everything changed," Jay asked gently, "do you want to talk to him?" Harold looked out across the yard, eyes distant. "I do. But too much time has passed. I wouldn't know what to say." Jay hesitated. "Then maybe just start with hello." That night, Jay went home and found himself watching the video again, the one someone had filmed in the restaurant. It had now surpassed 2 million views, and the comments kept coming. "I wish my grandpa had someone like this. This young man restored my faith in people. Where can I find more stories like this?" The video had gone viral, not for drama, not for scandal, but because people were desperate for proof that kindness still existed. And Jay, well, he was beginning to realize that small gestures can leave bigger marks than he ever imagined. The next morning, Harold called him. His voice was different. "I found my son's number," he said. "I'm thinking about calling." Jay smiled. "That's good, Harold. That's real good." But what neither of them knew was that someone else had been watching that video too. Someone thousands of miles away, who hadn't spoken to Harold in nearly a decade, and he was already on his way back home. Harold stood at the window, nervously adjusting the collar of his cleanest shirt. It had been almost 10 years. 10 years since he'd last seen his son. 10 years since harsh words were exchanged. Since misunderstandings festered into silence. Since birthdays passed without calls, holidays without visits. He wasn't sure what he'd say, or if anything could bridge that time. Jay sat on the porch steps, watching the street, his foot bouncing nervously. "He said he'd be here by noon," Harold murmured. "It's 5 till," Jay replied, glancing at his phone. "Plenty of time." They sat quietly until the sound of a car pulling up broke the stillness. A black SUV slowed in front of the house. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, maybe in his 40s. His expression was unreadable. Harold froze. His breath caught. Jay stood ready to intervene if needed. But Harold raised a hand. "Let me." He walked to the screen door and stepped outside. The two men looked at each other, not with anger, not with resentment, but with something far more fragile: uncertainty. "Daniel," Harold said softly. "Dad." The word came out almost unsure, like dust shaken from an old book. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then Daniel took a step forward. "I saw the video. Someone sent it to me. You sitting alone. That kid giving up his table. I didn't know." Harold nodded slowly. "I didn't expect you to." Daniel's voice cracked. "You looked so small, and I felt so far away." Harold's shoulders slumped slightly. "You were angry. You had a right to be. I just wish we hadn't let so much time go." "I do too." Jay stepped back, giving them space. He watched as Daniel took another step, and then finally embraced his father. It wasn't a dramatic movie hug. It was clumsy, stiff at first, but real, painful, healing. Tears welled up in Harold's eyes as he held on to his son, like he might disappear again if he let go too soon. Inside, Jay sat alone in the kitchen, pretending to check his phone, pretending not to listen. But his chest felt warm, full. Later that afternoon, all three of them sat on the porch, with lemonade in hand, just like every other Saturday. But this time, there were new stories being told, new voices chiming in, new laughter that hadn't been heard on that porch in years. Harold glanced over at Jay. "None of this would have happened without you." Jay shook his head. "I just gave up my seat." Harold smiled. "Sometimes that's all it takes." The days that followed felt like something out of a quiet miracle. Daniel kept coming back, not just for Harold, but for himself. There was so much to mend, so many words. They'd never said, so much silence to fill with laughter, apologies, and rediscovered love. They'd watch baseball games together in the living room, just like they used to when Daniel was a kid. Harold would mutter critiques under his breath, and Daniel would shake his head, pretending to disagree even when he didn't. Jay still came by every Saturday, but now it wasn't just Harold he was visiting. It was family. They shared meals, repaired the old fence, painted the porch railing one afternoon, even though Harold insisted the old paint had character. Jay learned how to brew Harold's strange cinnamon coffee blend, and Daniel taught him how to fix the engine on his old truck. One weekend, Daniel brought his daughter, Harold's granddaughter, who had never met her grandfather until then. She was shy at first, but by the end of the afternoon, she was curled up in Harold's armchair, listening to him tell stories about World War II, peppering him with questions like, he was a character from a book she never wanted to end. And that's when it hit Jay, the full weight of what had happened. That one moment in a restaurant, one choice to stand up, had unraveled a decade of silence. He had no idea when he gave up that table that he'd be giving someone their family back. News outlets reached out. They wanted interviews, coverage, photo ops. Jay declined them all. Harold, too. This wasn't a show, Harold said. This was life. But one news piece did go out, a local feature, titled "The Power of a Simple Act." It showed a still image from the viral video, Jay standing next to Harold, the restaurant doors behind them, and the world quietly beginning to watch. Beneath it, a quote from Jay, "You don't always know what someone's carrying, but if you've got the chance to make them feel seen, even for a minute, take it." That article found its way to community boards, schools, even the office of a state senator, who, after reading the piece, proposed a bill to better recognize veterans in public spaces. It was a small ripple, but it kept going. Months passed. The seasons began to change. The porch flowers wilted and were replaced. The trees lining Harold's street turned from green to gold. Jay's visits never stopped. On a quiet autumn morning, Harold sat in his armchair holding a letter with shaking hands. It was from the restaurant, not from the hostess or the manager, but from the owner. He'd seen the video, read the story, and he wanted to make things right. The letter apologized not just for how Harold was treated, but for what it represented. It offered him a permanent reserve table, not for publicity, not for a photo, just in case he ever wanted to come back. Harold folded the letter neatly and slid it into his journal. Maybe one day, he said to himself. That Saturday, Jay arrived to find something new. On Harold's front lawn, a wooden bench. Carved into it in small letters was the phrase, "Sometimes all it takes is one seat." Jay sat beside him. Harold handed him a worn photo, a snapshot from years ago, of a young soldier and his wife, arms wrapped around each other outside the very same house. That was June. "And me," Harold said softly. "We used to dream about filling this porch with laughter." "We did for a while," Jay nodded, looking at the photo. Then out at the quiet neighborhood, now slowly filling again, with that same sound. "Thank you for giving that back to me," Harold added. Jay didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything, just sat there like he had the first time. Quiet, present. And as the sun dipped behind the trees, Harold closed his eyes, peaceful. He passed away in his sleep. A few weeks later, the funeral was small, but full of warmth. Daniel delivered the eulogy, holding back tears, as he spoke about second chances and the man he finally got to know again. Jay sat near the front, wearing the 101st Airborne pin Harold had once given him, polished and gleaming. As people filed out, many stopped to thank Jay, not because he was famous, not because he went viral, but because he reminded them of something too easily forgotten. That kindness, real quiet, unseen kindness, still lives among us. And sometimes the most powerful stories begin not with a speech, but with the decision to simply stand up. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts below. We read every single one. Don't forget to hit subscribe for more real stories that inspire, heal, and remind us of the good in the world. And join us in the next video, where another quiet moment could change everything. We'll see you soon.